So I started playing the Forever Winter shortly after it came out last year and have since sunk about 50 hours into the game. While I felt like the in-universe character style marketing with the gruff scav talking about game dev stuff bordered on being lame, the game had such a fantastic visual presentation that I felt drawn to check it out. What I found was a game early in development that had the potential to offer what I think the extraction genre could do best: high intensity, round based game modes that allow you to interact with a dynamic environment in which your own stories are written by the actions you take, with real consequences constantly looming behind you. The setting was something ripped straight out of a cyber dystopian metal album, and having you play as the scavengers in the midst of war was so appealing. A few weeks ago, I made a video about Metal Gear Solid 4's Battlefield Stealth, where I expressed how blown away I was by the unique gameplay that Metal Gear Solid 4 offered, especially in the first three acts. Rightfully, a handful of people in the comments of the video pointed out that the Forever Winner may offer a similar experience to that. As I had said, I was looking to play more games like that. I immediately kicked myself for not thinking about this connection, and would have loved an opportunity to talk about the things I love about the Forever Winner in that video. But then I started to think about why I didn't make that connection initially. I recalled how the stealth wasn't really in a functional state, even the last time I played back in April or May. I remembered the inability to join a multiplayer match 90% of the time. The tanks flying through the air, the underground map being basically unplayable because the robot dog that chases you was able to clip through seemingly every object on the map. This combination of jankiness and unpleasantries had really left a bad taste in my mouth, and I remembered feeling kind of bummed that while they had added some beautiful new maps and enemies, that the gameplay had still felt relatively the same since its early access launch. The flaws were so glaring that even though it sought to perfectly scratch this unique itch I have for chaotic battlefield stealth gameplay and extraction elements, that I feel like I haven't been able to enjoy the execution of the game at the highest level yet, and I still couldn't see the game in the way that the developers hope to deliver it. Despite all of this, I still feel an urge to jump back in and experience the grimdark hellscape that is the Forever Winter. And so I did, and it is also a fitting time since it just had its 1 year anniversary of being in early access on Steam. Let's talk about where the game is at, what I enjoy most about it, and what the future holds for the Forever Winter. Okay, so upon initially launching the game, I was greeted by the same main menu, which isn't bad, it's pretty clean, but I do wish that some of the visuals playing in the background were changed up or added just to represent the growth and development that has occurred within the game over the past year, even if the King in Yellow is such a perfect villainous presence. The music still goes hard, and the whole game is filled with the great mix of dark synth tracks that tonally match the environments that you're in perfectly. Now, when you load into your base, the game starts with a cool little cutscene that sees your character entering your hideout. But for me, an alert message was plastered over top of it, and the textures didn't load in at first. I was able to change characters and get to see a few of these animations working properly, and I do think it's a nice touch that makes the game feel more immersive. From what I can tell, the main systems or additions that have been added for gameplay are stamina, which sees your character running low if you sprint for too long or carry heavy weight, the addition of a weapon repair station that you can add to your base, and the inclusion of grenades, which I don't think were in the game the last time I played. I believe the last new map that I played was Stairway Gate. Two have been added since then, Babel and Downtown Lost Angels, which seem like incredible maps, and I really enjoyed the snowy spire kind of map that they had added a while ago as well. 10 maps is huge for an extraction game, even if some are smaller. The variation in environments is also a breath of fresh air, considering how much landscape you get to see. And before I continue on, I'm just going to give you a heads up. I'm running the game on an i7 and a 3070 graphics card, so while I will talk about some performance issues, I recognize that I don't have the latest hardware, and potentially it's related to that. though generally I did feel like the game ran better while I was playing now as opposed to a few months ago. I also noticed that the base now has a new secret storage vault that protects items from base invasion, which seems like a cool mechanic. I think that this came around the time that they moved away from the water system. When Forever Winter initially released, they had a real time water system where 1 unit of water would deplete over 1 day. By gathering more water, you would unlock more resources within your base, and that would allow you to progress and add additions to your little home. Some people were very upset about this gameplay mechanic because they felt like it was a FOMO kind of situation trying to make the player feel forced into playing day to day. I personally didn't have an issue with it considering how manageable it was to farm water, and I do think that it made the game have a clearer purpose when you sign back in if you do take some considerable amount of time off. I also like the idea of being reset a little bit since in most traditional extraction shooters, there is a reset period where you lose a lot of your upgrades and items. Whereas in Forever Winter, when I logged back in, I still had a lot of money and access to all of the upgrades. And not a lot of additional upgrades were added. Like I said, really just the weapon repair station has been added. So I was kind of coming back into the game already at the end game, which I guess feels good given that the time I put in was appreciated, but it also left me dealing with the maps in a way that didn't feel like the Forever Winter experience I had had when I first started. Now the water is valuable because it costs you water to deploy to certain maps and entry points. For example, the higher tier in-game style maps could cost up to 3 or 4 water just for you to deploy. And I also know that there's another mechanic where if you have too much water, maybe your base could get raided. So the next time you log in, you have to do a combat operation inside of your hideout, which I think is a really, really cool mechanic. I also noticed when going through the menus that a lot of the images for the items have been given like way higher fidelity and they look fucking rad. Another thing that I don't remember if it was added was Mask Man. I was Mask Man, one of the characters in the game. At this point, they have quite a few characters you can choose from, and all of them look really, really cool, especially Gunhead, which is such a cool concept. It could just be that Mask Man was in the game, and now I'm playing as him with the Plague Doctor style mask. Either way, the character designs are fantastic, and it's fun to bounce around, especially with the progression system they have, where each character has a separate set of traits that you can upgrade, and then you prestige to get access to more experience and gain further levels of their skill tree. It does make it feel like, despite losing all of your gear and items when you get killed, you still have an opportunity to expand and come back with some attributes that are more beneficial, even if your gear has been lost. And yes, you can still pet the dog, which is great. And it seems like new animations have even been added for the different characters, which is awesome. The other upgrade that I noticed was that there were 2 additional water bots, which will go out and collect the water resource for you while you're not playing. Like when I logged in, I got like 30 water or something just because I had one of these. Potentially, the other 2 water bots that allow you to get even more water were in the game originally, and I just don't remember that and didn't access them before I stopped playing, but those are there now as well. Generally, when it comes to the base and the upgrades that I've gotten, I think the system is really cool and I like all the avenues that you can upgrade, but I don't like the fact that I seemingly maxed it out in 40 hours or so. I mean, really, if I remember correctly, I played the game for quite a while once I had an abundance of resources. So I feel like for an extraction game where the stories that you're making are based upon the match to match experience of the players, that the systems that exist outside of that need to last as long as the potential for the rounds, which kind of have a lot of replayability because of how dynamic the environments are and the kind of quests you're going to want to complete and the fun that you can have with friends. I do feel like that kind of detracts from the overall experience when, like I said, that can be finished in, for an extraction shooter, a relatively short amount of time. The weapon and rig customization is still great and hasn't really changed that much. Like I said, the fidelity for the weapons and equipments is rad and seems to have been upgraded, but overall it seems relatively similar. Having the custom visual look for every loadout does make it feel that much more special, But still, like I said, these systems are largely the same from when I remember playing originally. I did notice that there is now an encrypted radar selection below each map before you load in, which could be a cool way to disperse lore, but I wasn't really clear when I was inside the map where these radar towers are or what my actual reward would be. And in the 4 to 5 hours or so I played to test out the stuff that's been added to the game, I didn't run across this at all or complete any of these objectives. Now I'm going to move to just giving you a rundown of the experience I had playing a handful of the games that I did so you get a better idea as to where the game sits. One of the first games that I played was Scorched Enclave, which is an original map, so I had some comparison for what I had experienced a year ago and 6 months ago to now with the changes that have been added. The intensity is still there, and I once again cannot overstate how visually impressive what they are trying to do is. The environments and enemy designs work together so well to create a world that is truly captured by an endless war. The enemies didn't seem to spawn in until after I had progressed a bit, which is, I think, how it was when I had played last time. You kind of have to get out of that initial spawn area before shit starts to go crazy. But the standard ground units did seem to operate in a more logical way. I noticed them sticking together or fanning out and stacking on each other in corners, and that used to be something they did for seemingly no reason, whereas now the ground units do seem to be a bit more cohesive. Especially the zombie-like ones who, while it makes sense that they're roaming around chaotically, they are still slave warriors with some sort of coordinated idea, and them roaming in packs and locking onto a target and signaling to their friends to attack is as frightening as it was, but now with a little bit more consistency. The stamina bar also does make that threat much more viable since you can't maneuver as easily to avoid the zombie units or the mechs that are chasing you. I think the stamina bar is good. I do also like the idea that it changes from to character, and I'd imagine that like Scav Girl, who's a very fast character, might have infinite sprint or a much greater amount of stamina. And I think that, little bit that changes the playstyle from character to character could create a really cohesive team element, which is great. Unfortunately, flying enemies are still here, and a lot of the general jankiness around the explosions is still going on. I do know in their 1 year anniversary video, this is something they touched on about the tanks flying through the air, but in my very first game, I did see a helicopter bounce a mech back and forth like a ping pong ball, and while it is very funny to see, and I personally enjoy it, it does kind of take me out of the gritty experience that they're trying to present. And also, I would be very frustrated if I'm slowly crawling along, being a good little scav, and a mech that was bounced 300 feet from an engagement that I have no concept with landed on top of me and ended my run. Overall, that kind of first experience on a map that I had played, before a lot of the additions felt very similar to me, with slightly more focused AI and more consistent performance during the bigger AI engagements. The feeling of chaotic war is so superb, but that jankiness on the edges does still feel pervasive. Ground units seem to function more logically, but I still was able to blast the head off one while their teammates stood a few feet away without engaging or searching for me, so kind of a mixed bag. I also noticed that the quests seem to be largely the same. A few new quests I did notice were added, but most of the new ones seem to be about killing unique enemies, which, if I remember correctly when I first started playing, didn't really seem to consistently load into the maps when you had the quest. I remember, for example, there was one quest specifically that had you trying to take out a sniper, and I had loaded into one of the maps over and over and over again. I feel like trying to get it to spawn in, and I never found it. And I even following kind of instructions from people on the Forever Winter Discord or on the Reddit or something where they talked about completing the quest. I never had success actually being able to find that individual character. So if that's still the case, I'd imagine it's quite frustrating. But some of these quests look really cool, and obviously, once again, their character design is next level. And the other thing about the quests is that they still auto-complete sometimes as soon as you pick them up if you have the prerequisite materials. Perhaps that's intended, but it does kind of just feel like a bug considering the fact that I just randomly picked up 3 quests and they were all automatically completed as soon as I got them. So it seems like even if you have the materials, maybe that's not the way that it's supposed to be. I do imagine a situation where you could really min-max that system to get an insane abundance of resources if you were to farm like a bunch of water lockboxes or explosives and then complete a separate set of quests, turn those in so you're immediately able to get all of the ones that auto-complete within one round of just being at your hideout before even loading into a match. And once again, another thing that just adds a little bit of unnecessary jank that pulls you out of the immersion of the experience. All right, so I think the second game that I played was on Babel, which is one of the new maps. And this, like all the maps, is beautiful. I think the best explanation for the kind of visual style for some of these maps is like Gears of War meets the overworld in The Matrix. These giant statues of weeping, beautiful women and these bug-like insect drones that are flying around and constant chaos is such an incredible environment. And like I said, if either of those things are up your alley, you legitimately might want to play this game just to get to exist in the environment. There really isn't another game out right now with this level of fidelity and this level of content that would allow you to walk through these kind of environments and just have the moments despite all of the flaws. But this map takes place on a series of balconies and rooftops with this kind of infinite pit to the streets below that are always like a step or two to the left or right, which did also remind me of those old like PS1 Spider-Man games where the fog is right there, which always as a kid felt to me a little bit like a horror game. Maybe it was like the Silent Hill and Spider-Man kind of merging for me in my mind, but that's how this map is set up. And it is equally as scary as the old Spider-Man games as well. The AI does seem to work best in these tighter areas as well because they kind of have less variables to account for. When you're in a narrow corridor and you have a unit engaging with drones or a separate enemy unit that's coming from a different direction, it makes the AI behave more properly, I think, because it's limited to they're either approaching from one direction or the other. And thus, the choices that the AI are making aren't being impacted by perhaps them being signaled by another group that's across this battlefield or a random round hitting them from a tank that's engaged with something else and causing them to act in ways that don't really make logical sense for the situation that they're actively in. I also think that the stealth feels more satisfying as the variables of the chaotic larger maps are stripped away, which is unfortunate because that's the thing that I love about it. But also, these little tight corridor areas do have a lot of hidey holes for you to kind of slip into while these other combatants are engaging with each other. And overall, I did feel like I was able to logically take a stealth approach to this map up until the very end, which I think was intended given the extraction system here. The extraction here was very cool, and I don't think there's another one like it in the other maps right now, at least not that I've taken. You had to call an elevator at one location and then kind of run back across the map to actually get to the elevator once it arrived. And kind of once the elevator was called, of course, a new group of combatants had emerged and were, fighting right in the middle of the path that I had to take on this bridge across, this pit of death. This map would like greatly benefit, I think, from co-op play since the onslaught never ends, but the feeling is just so different from all the other stuff that I'm like think it works very well. Perhaps this is my favorite map. I do think that the stairway map also is probably up there for me just because of how it appears visually and just to have these kind of massive scale maps that are built around this one kind of idea, like this massive staircase is so cool. And Elephant Mausoleum, I think, is another one that stands out with the trenches and stuff. But I really enjoyed Babel. It was a ton of fun. And like I said, the AI kind of worked a little bit better in the closer knit spaces. And of course, I'm also falling more in love with Maskman, who has these great voice lines indicating that he too is terrified and wants to go home, which I personally identify with. There's still no way to view quest progression outside of the match, which I feel like is odd, or perhaps I'm missing something. Inside the match, you'll have like a little ticker saying you've killed 15 of 20 enemies, or you've gathered one of three of whatever resource. But outside the map, I didn't really see a way in the base or the menu system to view that. So another little quality of life theme that kind of seems confusing. Like, why couldn't that just carry over out there or be in the quest menu? But Babel was a ton of fun, and like I said, largely the same issues were apparent, but I do think that the maps are tending to kind of go in the direction of working with the game systems that they've developed, whereas some of the earlier maps are kind of against the grain of the system that they developed, because maybe the concept of the map came prior to them honing in on the exact gameplay feel. After that, I played the new map Downtown Lost Angels, which was very, very cool. This is kind of possibly the biggest map, which when you first load into it and you're kind of crammed in between the buildings, it doesn't really feel that way. But then you start going down one street and the other, and you're looking over and alleyways in either directions, and they're opening up to separate battlefields. And you see that some of the super massive sized mechs are actually in this city. And I will say another thing that cued me into how big the map was were the stutters. The performance on this map was the worst, and I think it was just because of the sheer amount of enemies that were constantly engaging and spawning in, and it looks really, really incredible. This is also where I noticed a new glitch that is just kind of like mind-boggling to me. Like, how can we not make these numbers right? Where the ammo for my guns would just, when I would load in, get stuck at random numbers for the bullet count. Uh, Possibly I was like losing ammo to this, and I'll actually talk a little bit more about this when I talk about the next map I played doing co-op. But it is very frustrating to all of a sudden have 28 rounds in your shotgun and not be able to reload it. And then you do reload, and it seems like maybe you're losing some of your ammo and you can't really tell where everything's at. And the fact that it happens as soon as you load in is just very unfortunate for setting the kind of tone and feeling that that match is going to have. Despite that, like I said, moving from street to street and getting glimpses of combat through either side does make you feel encapsulated by violence, and you really do feel like a cockroach scattering through rubble to try to find your way. The map's huge, and it benefits from that same thing that Babel does, despite it being huge, because each road seems like a, 2-lane. Enemy knows either point this direction or that direction, and they know how to kind of move around the corners more effectively. And it seems like this is kind of a good mix of you're getting a big playable area to explore, but also the AI aren't burdened by having to account for this large area because they're closed into these smaller sections. But with all the rubble and destruction, the other thing that comes out in this map is the jankiness of the vertical movement. Really, there is so much rubble on this map, and trying to get by it on either side or go over top of it, you're going to encounter something that just doesn't make sense. Some sort of invisible plane that you're standing on, getting kind of bounced side to side as you do the jump. And I like the idea that, like on not Scorched Enclave, Ashen Mesa, maybe you can kind of like jump your way up on top of these, piles of rubble and these kind of abstract apartment systems that they had built, into this war, into this battlefield. And it's like, it is cool that there is a maneuvering way to get up on top of this, even though it doesn't appear like that's something you can interact with. It doesn't seem like geometry as part of the map, right? But that map benefits from the fact that it's a lot of flat vertical ledges, and so it's less kind of janky. This map, Los Angeles, has a lot of rubble and stuff that you can kind of maneuver on and get around, but it's a lot of like diagonal surfaces and weird edges that just don't really seem to mesh super well with the movement system that they've developed. And so it is unfortunate that some of this map, kind of areas that you just want to entirely avoid, despite being active zones that you can go to and that enemies will even kind of hide and lurk within, just because I don't want to get caught kind of in a weird position or end up sliding down a rock in a weird way or bounce to the left or right when I'm trying to avoid being seen by an evil unit of brawlers. The fourth game that I played was Underground Cemetery. This is the one where the robot dog chases you the whole time, and like I had said maybe earlier, I had really gotten frustrated with because it, it always clipped through geometry and would kill me. And so it's like I never ever get to an extraction in this map. And overall, it's like you're loading up to go into this place that looks super cool and it has some occult stuff going on and it's underground. It's very different from everything else, but it's just the dog killing you makes it so unplayable because you just lose everything. You just, like, you can't account for it, and it's so game breaking in the way it operates. So I wanted to give it a try to see if it had changed, and I also wanted to try co-op. So the co-op, I'm gonna say, was 100 times better. Okay, I got into the match on the first attempt. Um, I was able to like voice communicate with them, text communicate with them. I didn't experience any lag or stuttering. There was no like rubber banding with everyone else, and I'm pretty sure one of the players in the match was from Russia. So I was really blown away that it worked effectively, and I seemed to have no issues. All right. But the other component is that same ammo glitch that I experienced on downtown Los Angeles happened again. And I was immediately out of ammo after reloading one magazine. Perhaps this is a mechanic I don't understand. Perhaps ammo was stolen by a little robot thief or something. But it seems like a glitch because my ammo, I couldn't reload, and then it was at a random number, and then it was gone. And then right after that, I was killed by the dog who ran right past all my teammates, it felt like, and just singled me out before I even got into like the second room of the map. So fuck this map, kindly. Even though I love the way it looks and I love the occult representation and I want to explore it, I just can't because the dog is either clipping through stuff or immediately locking onto me every time I play it. I just don't know that the stealth system is refined enough to make it a viable experience. I did spend some more time going through the game and playing on other maps and spend a few more matches on Babel and downtown Los Angeles. But generally, I think that what I walked away from with, these kind of first few rounds that I experienced after getting back into the game was pretty consistent with what was going on in those matches as well. I do enjoy this game. I really think that visually what they're doing here is so unique and put together so well that it's something that I want to spend more time in. But once again, all of these issues that I pointed out just from the initial experience didn't change or get better with my understanding of the gameplay mechanics or systems as I progressed onward. Another thing that I will say before I kind of conclude this video is that while I was making this video, I think yesterday, maybe even, they had posted a new update to their YouTube account, which was a trailer for a new underground tunnel system. And maybe it's in my game. My game just updated, so maybe I'll play that later today and try it out. But it's another situation where it seems like a super cool addition where you have these tunnels that I believe are randomized each time and allow you to connect from one map to another, possibly. It reminds me a lot of the kind of like Bloodborne Chalice dungeon system, if you're familiar with that. I don't know if mechanically it works the same way, but the idea that there are these underground changing areas that give these dynamic little set pieces for you to move in between the maps, that sounds really cool and another amazing piece of immersion. But can that escape the other issues that make it difficult to invest a lot of time playing into the game? I don't know. But it is something cool, and I do want to say that this video is not going to reflect anything about that component because I haven't experienced it yet, but they are still making changes and obviously adding a lot of new stuff to the game, and they're pretty consistent in their communication with the player base as to the kind of stuff they're working on, both in the Discord and publicly on YouTube and their marketing materials. All right, so I guess in conclusion, 1 year into the Forever Winter, and the game is fun. I would love to hop in with a full crew and good working comms if it works, but it's dragged down so much by the technical issues that it's difficult to get the full experience of what the game could be. It is incredible that it has 10 maps and in-depth weapon customization element and character skills and upgrades and these beautiful illustrations and art that is put on display so well within the game. But I do wish that a larger focus had gone into building really solid gameplay feel around the shooting, stealth, and enemy AI before these things. If they can hone in on making the gameplay feel consistent and frictionless while maintaining a leaning on the stealth elements of the game, I really feel that this could become such a unique package that it wouldn't really have any solid competition. I'm definitely going to be playing a bit more on stream and getting some more runs on the new map. So if you're interested in checking that out, there's a link to my Twitch in the description. I would love to hear your thoughts on the Forever Winter currently in the comments below, and I'll see you guys later. All right.